All right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Coastal Performance Nutrition Podcast. My name is Callum. I'm an online coach. You want to know more about me? Go back to episode 1. I spent enough time talking about myself, my background, all that sort of stuff. First of all, thank you to 160 odd of you who chose to watch at least 10 to 15 seconds of the first episode. I was stoked with that. I was stoked. I was well expecting 25, 30 views, maybe. The fact that 160 odd people even clicked the link and chose to watch 10 to 15 seconds of that video, very, very appreciative. And it's now sitting at like 15 hours of watch time. So the fact that whoever you are, collectively, you spent 15 hours listening to me ramble, I hope it was useful. I really appreciate all the positive feedback and support that I got through messages, even from strangers on the internet. That was kind of cool. But yeah, I'm not going to ramble anymore. As per the title of this video, how does weight loss and weight gain work, or weight maintenance as well? That's what I'm going to be covering in today's episode. So if I'm looking over to the left, I've got some notes. I don't script these videos, but I do have some notes to give me some structure so that I don't lose where I'm going on my very long random tangent. So essentially, we're going to break down how weight loss and weight gain works. And in the end, this does all come down to calories in, calories out. Now, don't leave yet. There's two sides to this conversation. There's the side that really complicates things, and there's the side that oversimplifies things. As always, whenever we're talking about nutrition, context matters, and usually if we see two extremes to an argument, if we come somewhere in the middle, we find the truth. And that's what I hope to give you today. So at the end of the day, it does come down to energy balance, which is calories in, calories out. That's what we're essentially talking about. But I think, like I said, we've got one side of the industry that sort of says, oh, calories in, calories out, or eat less, move more. And it gets simplified in that way, and we lose people because people are like, well, thanks Einstein, but what do I do with that? We can't just scream calorie deficit at people and expect them to then be, have what they need to then go and lose weight or gain weight. So at the end of the day, if we simplify things down to calories in, calories out, I will get into the nitty gritty complex side of things as well, but we're going to start simple. So if we start very simple, energy balance, calorie balance, what are we talking about? We're talking about our calorie output, our calories out, and our calorie input, or how many calories we're eating from food. They are the two things that matter. But now, there's a lot that goes into both the calorie output and the calorie input. There's more than just burning calories and eating calories. There's a lot more detail and complexity to those both sides of the equation. So at the end of the day though, if we look at things on the most simple level, if we want to maintain weight, we need to match our calories in, we need to match our calories out and our calories in. Okay, so this side calories out, this side calories in. All right, if we want to maintain weight, we need to match those as best as we can. And yes, I know sometimes we may not be able to track our calories in or our calories out very accurately, but we can have a pretty good estimate. At the end of the day, we need to try and match them if we want to gain weight. If we want to try and lose weight or lose fat over a long period of time, we need to have our calorie output exceed our calorie input. And this gap here is called an energy deficit. So if we are burning 2,000 calories on a daily basis and we're only eating 1,500, there's a 500 calorie gap there. And that gap in energy requirements for our body, if we're burning 2,000 calories, that is energy. That is energy that we're using. So if we're only eating 1,500 calories, of that 2,000, the other 500 calorie gap in energy needs to come from our stored body tissue. A lot of the time, that's going to come from either our stored body fat or our stored carbohydrates. And in rare cases, it's going to come from our stored protein as well. If we want to gain weight, our calorie output, or the calories we burn, needs to be exceeded by the amount of calories we're taking in on a daily basis. So this here is an energy surplus. So if our energy is down here, or our energy intake's down here, that's a deficit. If it's up here above our output, it's a surplus. When we have a surplus of energy, where we're only burning 2,000 calories a day and we're eating 2,500, that energy surplus, the 500, is usually stored as body fat or body tissue in some form. It can be stored as carbohydrates, it can be stored as body fat, it can be stored as muscle tissue as well. But I'll get more into the nitty gritty later. So that's the basics of it. Essentially, at a simple level, if we want to maintain weight, we need to match our calorie output and our calorie intake. If we want to lose weight, we need to have our calorie input be below our calorie output or our calories burnt. If we want to gain weight, our calorie input needs to be above our calorie output. All right, that's the simple level. Now, like I spoke about, there is two sides to this coin, right? The one side is the people who oversimplify this whole topic, all right? We've all seen them. They just go around saying calorie deficit, and like everyone's like, how do I lose weight? They're like calorie deficit, and they leave the conversation there. It's obviously more complex than that. We need to give people, we can't just state a principle and expect people to know what to do. It's just like telling someone, hey, earn more, spend less to get rich. Great. What do I do with that information? Same thing when it comes to losing weight. Okay, eat less, move more. Great. What do I do with that? There's a little bit more nuance to the conversation that I think when we oversimplify things, I think in a lot of ways, if we oversimplify things a lot, we make people feel stupid because people have tried to eat less, move more, and it hasn't worked. And if we just sit here and say, just eat less, move more, people are like, well, I've already fucking tried that and it didn't work for me. So am I broken? Like, what's wrong with me? So I think oversimplifying helps no one. Yes, there's true parts of that where eat less, move more does have some application, but we need to explain what we mean when we say eat less, move more, because realistically we're saying less calorie intake and more calorie output. And there's a lot more than just eating and moving that goes into those two sides of things, okay? So that's the one side we have. Then we have the side that annoys me more, the overcomplicators. They're the people who they try and direct your attention to some of the more complexities of human physiology, and things like hormones generally come into the conversation, genetics, all that sort of stuff. And they paint the picture that hormones override calories in, calories out. And it doesn't. It doesn't. Hormones, behavior, genetics, all of these things, they do not act separately to calories in, calories out. They just influence one side of that equation of sorts, okay? So when we're talking about hormones, for example, people will be like, oh, well, insulin. If you eat carbs, your insulin goes up. That's great. That's what that hormone is supposed to do. Now, that doesn't mean that if your insulin goes up, that you just automatically gain body fat over the long term. We have to always make sure we're bringing things back to calories in, calories out, because even if our insulin is sky high, our cortisol is sky high, if they're sky high and we're not consuming an energy surplus, we cannot gain weight. We can't gain body fat. We might see the scale go up from some water retention, but we can't gain body fat if we're not in an energy surplus. Because I will pose the question to you, how do you think we will gain energy on our body without consuming it? Can we just spontaneously snap our fingers and create energy out of thin air? I would argue no. Unless we're consuming energy, we can't just spontaneously create body fat. We can't think our way to gaining body fat. It has to come from somewhere. And that somewhere is through food or drink that contains calories. Okay, so I understand the complexities that some people try and dive into, but for the most part, the unfortunate reality is I think the people who don't understand human physiology or human biology try and explain the complexities, and they don't understand how it ties into the bigger picture, regardless of what your hormones are doing, regardless of your cortisol, regardless of your blood sugar, regardless of everything. It's influencing one side of that equation, calories in or calories out. Let's say your insulin goes up, okay, great. Are you in an energy surplus? No, you won't gain fat. Let's say your insulin goes rock bottom. Are you in an energy deficit? No, you won't lose fat. So we can't just point to hormones and say, oh, well, calories in, calories out doesn't work because hormones. Hormones is part of the conversation. It's just that we've come to, I guess, accept that the people who oversimplify it are just disregarding everything that goes into calories in, calories out. But what I'm trying to do is explain where this middle meeting point is, okay? And I think to do that, we need to understand what goes into calories out and what goes into calories in. So when we're saying calories in, calories out, how weight loss works, what are we talking about? So more specifically, when we're talking about calories out, we are talking about our total daily energy expenditure. You may have seen this before written as TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. That is, quite simply, how many calories we burn on a daily basis, our total daily energy expenditure, okay? And there's a lot of different things that make up that sort of energy output side of things. First thing, we've got our basal metabolic rate. So that is going to be the biggest for most people, unless you're a very active athlete. Your basal metabolic rate is going to be the biggest component of your total daily calorie output or your energy expenditure. Okay, so your basal metabolic rate is essentially how many calories you burn per day just existing. So if you were to wake up tomorrow, or if I was to wake up tomorrow and just lay in the bed in that room just there, how many calories would I burn just existing? Because as you sit there on your phone, in bed, wherever you're watching this, you are burning calories. Even if you're not moving and you're just here like this on your phone, your heart's still working, your brain's still working, your kidneys are still filtering things, your liver is detoxifying things, your body is still doing things, okay? All of the tissue on your body, mainly the active tissue, so everything on your body is basically using energy on a minute by minute basis, a second by second basis. And that essentially makes up our basal metabolic rate. So we don't need to move in order to burn calories. About 60 to 70% of our total daily energy expenditure is made up from just existing, all right? Then we look at our NEAT, so our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is essentially all of the calories that we burn through daily activity or daily movement that isn't structured exercise. Okay, so think me waving my hands right now, that's burning calories, that's NEAT. Me fidgeting my feet under the table, that's NEAT. Me walking around the house to do housework, that's NEAT. Me walking to and from the car or pacing when I'm on a phone call, all that sort of stuff, that unintentional movement that isn't intentional exercise, that's NEAT, and that is burning calories. And that's probably one of the biggest variable components of our overall daily energy expenditure. And I'll talk about that more once I go through these all. Then we've got our exercise activity thermogenesis, so the calories that we burn through exercise. Okay, so when you go and do a structured walk, you go and do a run, you go and train in the gym, you play footy, soccer, golf, whatever it is, we burn calories doing those exercises, doing those activities, and that is our exercise activity thermogenesis. Okay, then the final part that a lot of people aren't actually aware of is the energy that we burn digesting. So the thermic effect of feeding. Okay, our TEF. So that is the calories that we burn digesting food. All right, so when we consume food, that food has calories, usually in the form of macronutrients. So protein, carbs, and fats, they are our macronutrients. Now, protein and carbs have 4 calories per gram. Fats have 9 calories per gram, all right? When we eat that food though, we can't just eat it and absorb it because it's a part of the whole food matrix, we call it. So when we eat food, it's a food matrix. The food is whole, and we have to mechanically and chemically break it down. So we chew it, mechanically break it down, and then we chemically break it down as well in our stomach, in our digestive juices. And then we absorb it, all right? But that whole process of mechanically chewing it and chemically digesting our food, and the energy required to move our digestive system, because that's a muscle, that requires energy. So when we consume fats, if we consume, say, 100 calories worth of fats, we use 2 to 5% of the calories we consume to digest those fats. So if we consume 100 calories of fats, we might use 2 to 5 calories to digest that 100 calories, okay? And then when it comes to carbs, we might use 5 to 10% of the total calories we consume to digest the carbohydrates. So we consume 100 calories of carbohydrates, we use 5 to 10%, so 5 to 10 calories to digest that 100 calories of carbohydrates. When it comes to protein, we look at anywhere from, say, 10 to 20% of the calories we consume are used to digest the protein. So we consume 100 calories of protein, we use maybe 10 to 20 calories to digest that 100 calories of protein, all right? So the process of digestion itself is an active process that requires energy as well, okay? So this is not all of these things, our BMR, our basal metabolic rate, our NEAT, our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, our EAT, our exercise activity thermogenesis, and our TEF, our thermic effect of feeding. These things aren't static. So static meaning they don't stay the same. They are variable. And they're variable based on a lot of things. I'm just putting a note there for me to keep talking about this. This is my tangents. So when we talk about these things being variable, they change, and they change depending on inputs and outputs. Okay, so inputs being what are we giving our body, outputs being what are we asking our body to do. So if we talk about variability, these things changing, we can break it down one by one. So if we start at the thermic effect of feeding, if we have someone who's eating a high fat, high carb, low protein diet, if we know that fats and carbs only take 2 to 5, maybe 10% of the total calories are used to digest the food, then we're only going to burn, per 1,000 calories, we might burn anywhere from 20 to 100 calories digesting that 1,000 calories. If we're consuming a super high protein diet, and we know that protein can take 10 to 20% of the calories from that protein are used to digest it, we might be burning, if we're eating a high protein diet with 1,000 calories, we might be burning 100 to 200 calories just digesting the protein that we've consumed. So same amount of calories, but this is a calories out part of things. So people are like, oh, calories in, calories out doesn't work because if you eat different macros, then you burn more calories or you absorb less calories. That's because this is part of the calories out side of the equation. So calories in, calories out are just umbrella terms that have a lot of things underneath them. So this is more of the complexities, okay? So yeah, if we think about thermic effect of feeding, if we consume different macronutrient amounts, so different amounts of protein, carbs, fats, even different amounts of fiber, if we consume whole food versus processed food, so if we consume 100 calories of processed food, 100 calories of whole foods, we might burn more calories digesting the 100 calories of whole foods compared to the processed foods. And we've studied this, and that's how it plays out. Because digesting processed food, if you think digesting a piece of white bread versus digesting a piece of steak, the white bread is going to be a lot easier for your body to digest compared to the steak. So you're going to burn more calories actively digesting the steak compared to the white bread. Usually that's what we see. When we have processed foods versus whole foods, we'll burn more calories through the process of digestion itself when we are digesting the whole foods versus the processed foods. Okay, so thermic effect of feeding, the digestive process, the amount of calories we burn through that is extremely variable. On the lower side, it might only be 2 to 5% of our total daily calorie consumption. So we consume 2,000 calories in a day. We might burn, what's 2% of that? Quick maths. We might burn anywhere from 40 to 200 calories digesting that 2,000 calories. If we consume 2,000 calories of whole foods, really protein-rich, high fiber, vegetables and fruits, we might get to the end of the day and we've burnt 20% of the total calories that we've consumed have been burnt in order to digest this more complex foods that we've eaten. So we eat 2,000 calories of whole foods, we might burn 300 to 400 calories just digesting it all, because it's a lot more whole and it's just harder to digest because it hasn't been broken down, which essentially is what processed food is. So there's a big variability in, depending on what foods you're eating, the amount of calories you're burning through digestion itself can change. And it can change anywhere from 1 to 2 to 300 calories in a single day, depending on the food choices you're making. And that's just one part of the calories out conversation that can change. Then exercise activity thermogenesis, that can obviously change drastically. If we look at triathletes, Ironmen, we look at marathon runners, they might be burning 3 to 4 to 5,000 calories in some days through the training that they're doing, and that's that exercise activity thermogenesis. Okay, so exercise activity thermogenesis is, I think, probably the main way that people assume that we burn calories. We don't need to exercise to burn calories because, like I just went through, we have our basal metabolic rate, our NEAT, and our TEF. Those are things that can burn calories. Exercise is just one part of the equation. For you, if you're training 2 days a week for 30 minutes, you may only burn 400 to 500 calories a week with your training. But if you're a marathon athlete or an Ironman, you might be burning 2,000 calories a day or 3,000 calories a day through exercise. And I guess that's the most controllable part of our calories out. But what we see is when exercise activity thermogenesis goes up and we burn more calories through exercise, we might burn less calories from our metabolism coming down a little bit, or we might do less NEAT because we've expended a bunch of energy through training. I don't want to dive too deep into that sort of stuff, but just knowing that exercise activity thermogenesis is probably the easiest one to understand, that it's variable based on how much exercise you actively choose to do. Alrighty? A person who runs for an hour a day is going to burn more calories than a person who doesn't run for an hour a day. Alright? NEAT. NEAT is probably the most variable. If I take a step back, your basal metabolic rate probably takes up about 60 to 70% of your daily energy expenditure. Your NEAT could be anywhere from 10 to 30% of your total energy expenditure. Your exercise activity thermogenesis, that could be anywhere from 5 to 15% of your total daily energy expenditure, unless you're a super high performing athlete and doing a bunch of exercise. And then your TEF, your thermic effective feeding, that might be another 5 to 10% of your total daily energy expenditure as well. Alrighty, so these things are quite variable depending on your specific situation, your behaviors, your lifestyle, your genetics. So our NEAT, our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, that's variable, very much so due to genetics and your response to underfeeding and overfeeding. So what we see in the research is some people's bodies are protective of weight gain and some people's bodies are protective of weight loss. So we take two people, different genetics. One person, they have a calorie maintenance of 2,000 to maintain their body weight. That other person, they have a calorie maintenance of 2,000 to maintain their body weight. Person A, we give them 3,000 calories, so a 1,000 calorie surplus. Their body might find ways to move more, they twitch a little bit more, they're a bit more active in their chair, they're fidgeting their feet, they're walking around more anxiously, their body heats up, their body just genetically finds ways to expend more calories. So their maintenance was 2,000, they eat 3,000, their body finds a way to burn more calories so that there's only about a 400 or 300 calorie surplus there. Person B, they might genetically have a body that is protective of weight loss. Their body's trying to gain weight for whatever reason. This is all stuff that can be very genetically dependent. So we give this person 3,000 calories, and instead of their body moving more, heating up, trying to expend some calories, they might expend an extra 50 calories. So they're gonna absorb that 950 calorie energy surplus. So two people, same maintenance calories, but they respond differently to overfeeding. And it's same in the other direction. This person here, whose body was very protective of weight gain, usually they will be able to lose weight easily. So they go into a calorie deficit and their body's just like, yeah, sweet, we're just gonna burn body fat. Then this person over here, whose body was very protective of weight loss, and it was easy for them to gain weight, genetically, when they go into a calorie deficit, they might fidget less, they might move around less, they might slouch a little bit more in the chair. Their body might find ways to become more efficient with movement, so that instead of burning 2,000 calories a day, when they're eating 1,500, their body will find a way to burn 1,800 a day while eating 1,500. So they swallow a little bit of that calorie deficit. And that's just reality. That doesn't mean that calories in, calories out doesn't work. It just means that there's more to this conversation than just moving more, eating less, okay? But there's no way around those things. That is one part of it where it's just genetics. Some people, when you give them more food, they just move more. We all know that person who can just pound food and they never gain weight. They are probably that person who genetically, their NEAT, their non-exercise activity thermogenesis, goes through the roof when they eat more calories. I am one of those people. But then there's other people who eat more calories and their body is very happy to just start storing it as body fat. Okay, so that's a big variable in the calorie out standpoint. Then we have our BMR. So this is the one that probably changes the least amount. When people say they have a broken metabolism or their metabolism is slowed down, here's the facts. When we look at the research, from the ages of 20 to 60, your metabolism does not substantially slow down. When I'm saying metabolism, I mean your basal metabolic rate, the amount of calories you burn just existing. 20 to 60, we don't see a substantial slowing down of metabolism. Okay, the line is sort of like this. It's very slight downward slope, very slight. So when you find yourself in the position where you feel like you have a slow metabolism, compared to when you were 17. This is just what we see in the research. The biggest determinants of your overall BMR, your basal metabolic rate, or your overall calorie burn for that matter, is your activity levels and your lean body mass. So your lean body mass is everything on your body that isn't fat tissue. Okay, because lean body mass, for the most part, is the stuff that's active. It's our organs, it's our muscle mass. It's the, our digestive system, it's our heart, our liver, our kidney, our brain, our muscle, the muscles that move subconsciously, like the ones in our digestive tract. That's the active tissue. So our lean mass, that is a very good predictor of how many calories you're going to burn on a daily basis. So if we take two people, one of them's 100 kilos with 90 kilos of lean mass, one of them's 100 kilos with 40 kilos of lean mass. This person here with 90 kilos of lean mass is going to burn more calories just simply existing compared to this person with 40 kilos of lean mass, because there's more active tissue doing stuff. Fat tissue doesn't do a whole lot. It is somewhat metabolically active. It does require energy to just sit on your body, but it's a very low amount versus active tissue. Our kidneys, our brain, our heart, our liver, our digestive system, our muscle tissue requires a lot of energy. So if you have more of that stuff, you're going to burn more calories. And that's one of the biggest components of your basal metabolic rate. How fast your metabolism is, lean body mass is a great predictor. So when we look at overall energy burn on a daily basis, lean body mass, big predictor. Activity levels, big predictor. They're the two biggest predictors. So again, this is not me just talking out of my ass. This is me having looked at the research and read other people's work who have dived into the research. From the ages of 20 to 60, your actual basal metabolic rate does not slow down all that much. So what happens? Why do you find yourself in this situation where you go, my metabolism slowed down? Do some reflection, okay? I'm gonna do reflection for myself, right? When I was 15, for example, I was playing representative soccer in Sydney. I was training maybe 4 days a week. Every single day I'd play soccer on the oval at lunch for maybe an hour. I'd walk to and from the car at school, maybe a 5-10 minute walk. When I get home from school on the days where I didn't have training, I'd probably go and kick a ball around, ride my bike, do something like that. On the weekends, I'd play 2 games of soccer. On a Sunday, I'd have a day off, probably be riding my bike, doing a bunch of stuff. A lot of activity. And then I reflect on this week. I've done 3 days of weight training and 10 to 12,000 steps a day. Big difference, right? So if I think back to my 15-year-old self being able to eat 3, 4, maybe 5,000 calories and not gaining weight versus now having about 2,800, 3,000 calories to maintain my weight, I've got 2 options. I can think my metabolism slowed down, it's all downhill from here, or I can acknowledge that when I was 15, I was doing a shit ton more exercise. And when we look at the variability in total daily energy expenditure based on the research, it is very dependent on your activity levels and your lean body mass. Obviously, when we talk about activity, things like the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, somewhat out of your control. Somewhat. Okay? Like your body's subconscious want to move more, we can't really dictate that. We can make a conscious effort to try and do more NEAT by, consciously choosing to do more housework or walk the dog or walk to work instead of driving our car or park further from work and walk instead. But that starts to get into exercise, in my opinion. But anyway, I won't dive into it. But I hope you can see that if you just to challenge yourself, I think the biggest thing when we're talking about weight loss and weight gain, you don't want to always be right. You always want to challenge your own mindset. Okay, so if you find yourself sitting there in the position where you're thinking you have a slow metabolism, compared to what? So compared to who and compared to what? So if it's compared to who, if you're comparing yourself to someone training, 7 times a week, running, holding a bunch of muscle mass, if you're comparing yourself to that person, they train a shit ton. Of course, their metabolism is faster. They're actively burning more calories by choice to train. So of course, if you're sitting there training twice a week, comparing your metabolism to someone training 7 days a week, of course they're burning more calories. They're moving way more. So that's who you're comparing it to, and then what are you comparing it to? If you're saying my metabolism is slow, compared to when? At what point in life are you comparing it to? Are you comparing it to when you were 16 and doing a bunch of organized sport, doing a bunch of activity, low stress, no work commitments, very little responsibilities, a lot of opportunities to move, versus now where maybe you're working a desk job doing 3,000 steps per day? That's a big difference. So it's about challenging our own thoughts, and instead of, I think there's two ways people can interpret this. There's one way where you will interpret this and go, Callum, you are wrong. My metabolism is slow, and that's fine. I can point you to the research if you like. Just message me. But then there's the other person who I hope this is the way it's interpreted. The way it's interpreted is you're not broken. And that should be an empowering message that you are in control. You're not broken. Your metabolism isn't broken. You have things that you can do to increase your metabolism. You can do things. You can work on building more lean body mass. You can work on doing more NEAT, finding ways to park the car further away, actively choosing to do more housework or mow the lawns, or actively choosing to walk the dog more, that sort of stuff. We can do more exercise. We can go for more walks. We can pick up running. We can pick up cycling. We can go to the gym. We can do Pilates. We can do all of these things. And we could shift our diet towards a higher protein, higher fiber, more whole foods diet to burn more calories in the process of digestion itself. So you're not broken. If you think you have a slow metabolism, you're not broken. You haven't broken your metabolism. I don't care who's told you that. You have not broken your metabolism. Your metabolism is not a piece of glass that breaks and cannot be repaired. It can somewhat downregulate and upregulate a little bit, but the biggest determinants of your metabolism is your lean body mass and your activity levels. And they're things within your control. The things that aren't within your control is your genetic propensity to move more or less or be protective against weight gain or weight loss, which some people, that's just the cards that you're dealt. But we can still do things to work around that. Okay? So the biggest message I hope you take from that is that you are not broken. Your metabolism is not broken. It should be empowering to you to hear this, that your metabolism doesn't slow down, and that if you think you have a slow metabolism, getting a fast metabolism is something within reach for you. And the answer lies in more activity. That doesn't mean that you have to pick up a marathon tomorrow and start running 100 kilometers a week. It just means that next week, instead of doing 4,000 steps per day on average, do 6,000 steps per day on average. And the week after that, do 7,000. Then after that, do 8,000. Okay? So this is all stuff that thankfully, for the most part, the calories outside of things is within our control. The final thing I'll mention, your basal metabolic rate. Does that change all that much? Like I just said, lean body mass and your activity levels, they're going to be a big determinant of your overall energy expenditure. But our basal metabolic rate, the amount of calories we burn just existing, can change a little bit. So if we go through chronic underfeeding, where we underfeed ourselves and put ourselves in an energy restriction for a long period of time, our basal metabolic rate can downregulate somewhat. But we're not talking about dropping by 500 calories. We're talking about a couple things. It might downregulate a little bit just because it's sort of going into low power mode somewhat. It's like, man, we're not getting much energy here. We're going to bring it down just a little bit, maybe 50 to 150 calories a day. Not all that much. But then the other part of the conversation is, as you lose weight, you are a smaller human. You therefore require less calories on a daily basis to maintain that body weight. So if you are 100 kilos and you lose weight down to 85 kilos, you're eating the same amount of calories and you're like, I'm not losing weight anymore. This doesn't work. No, it still does. It's just that you're a smaller human, so you're burning less calories to survive. So your calorie maintenance has dropped because you're a smaller human. So we either need to increase your calories to continue weight loss, or we either need to increase your calorie output to continue weight loss, or we need to decrease your calorie intake to continue weight loss. As you are a smaller human, your basal metabolic rate will drop because the biggest determinant of your basal metabolic rate is your lean body mass. And lean body mass isn't just muscle tissue, but as you lose body weight, you will lose some lean body mass as well, which is the importance of when we have this whole discussion about weight loss and maintaining muscle mass and maintaining lean body mass. That's why, because lean body mass is one of the things that is actively burning calories on our body. So if we're, the biggest issue now is these GLP-1 drugs, which are a miracle drug, but if people are taking them and not eating high protein and not resistance training, they're losing a lot of lean body mass, which is that thing that is protective of your basal metabolic rate and protective of just absolutely everything. But that's a conversation for another day. So I hope you can see there's a lot more that goes into calories out than just going to the gym. A lot more, all right? Now, what influences calories in? So this is the biggest part of confusion, because most people do not understand the difference between food volume and calories, okay? So when we eat food, food has different amounts of calories. Like I said previously, those calories come from macronutrients: protein, carbs, and fats. Protein and carbs, 4 calories per gram, roughly. Fats, 9 calories per gram. So depending on the food that we eat, it's gonna have different amounts of protein, carbs, and fats, okay? Now, where people get confused is, what's the difference between food volume and calories? So I've had clients ask, even last week, I'll be like, hey, we're gonna go into a calorie deficit. What we're gonna do is keep your food volume the same, but we're gonna drop your calories. And they're like, how the hell does that work? And I get it. It can be a little bit confusing. But what you have to understand is that when we look at foods, we can't dictate how many calories a food has just based on the size, because we could have a big head of broccoli and it might have, 70 calories. And then we could have a tiny thumb-sized portion, a teaspoon of olive oil, and it has 80 calories. So how the hell does that big head of broccoli have the same calories as this little thumb size worth of olive oil? That's because food volume and how many calories a food has is not the same thing. So that's what we call calorie density. So per 100 grams of food, how many calories does that food have? So if a food has 100 grams and it's got a very low amount of calories, we would say that's a high volume, low calorie food. If a food has, for 100 grams, a lot of calories, we would say that's a low volume, high calorie food, okay? So depending on what our goals are, if we're trying to lose weight, we might go for foods that have less calories per 100 grams. If we're trying to gain weight, we might go for foods that have more calories per 100 grams, okay? So depending on our goals, that's the important part. Context, always, always, always context, okay? So that is the first thing that I think confuses people with the whole calories in side of things, because I've had many clients in the past who, thankfully, we could work through it, who say, I'm eating 1,200 calories a day and I'm not losing weight. And they weren't arriving at that number through any logical way. They were just saying it because they thought they were consuming a small amount of calories. But biggest culprits, things that go unaccounted for: milk in coffees, oil when they're cooking, sauces. Holy shit, 20 grams of mayonnaise has 140 calories or something ridiculous. So if you think you do a little 20-gram drizzle of mayonnaise over your salad and you're like, that's a salad, that's got 30 calories. You just added 150 calories worth of mayonnaise. And for a lot of people, they're using a lot more than 20 grams of mayonnaise. They're using big amounts, and they've just dumped 400-500 calories worth of fat from their mayonnaise onto this salad that they assumed was very low calorie. So sauces and oils can be a big culprit here. Even things like nut butters or nuts. There's an important distinction between foods that are healthy and nutrient dense and foods that are low calorie, okay? Because if we think of nuts, super healthy, very nutritious. But if I have a handful of nuts, someone's going to take that out of context. I just know it. If I have a handful of nuts and I grab a full handful, behave yourselves, then that could have 400, 500 calories, okay? Very nutritious, but also very calorie dense. If I have a handful of blueberries, still very nutritious, but only maybe 50 calories, 60 calories, okay? So we need to make the important distinction versus, it's not food in, it's calories in, and that's a very different discussion. Food volume does not dictate the amount of calories that it has. That's a different conversation, okay? So the other things that come into the calories in side of things is the things that are a little bit more out of your control. Again, back to the genetics discussion, some people just have higher resting levels of hunger. Their genetics just dictate that they have higher levels of hunger at rest. We see that, and that's why these GLP-1 drugs have worked so well, because they target some of those hormones. Okay, so when we look, but again, this comes back to the discussion of people going, oh, well, hormones cause my weight loss. Okay, how? How did hormones cause weight loss? Weight gain. How did hormones cause spontaneous fat gain? Did they increase calories in or calories out? That's what we have to keep coming back to. So I hope that this arms you with the information that you need to traverse the absolute shit show of social media. Because I saw a video, I've seen multiple videos. First video I saw, if your insulin is sky high, even if you're not consuming calories, you will gain fat. How? Where is it coming from? Just always think about that. If something is causing you to gain fat, causing and leading to, big difference. Okay, causation is a big call. To say insulin causes fat gain, irrespective of calorie intake, that's a big call. To say any hormone causes fat gain, big call. How does it do that? That's something that pisses me off, by the way. People who just like say, oh, hormones caused it. Which hormones? The hormonal system is very complex, and if you don't understand it, it is very easy to miscommunicate it. So if we're talking about hormones causing fat gain, how? People are like, well, cortisol, high stress, high cortisol causes fat gain. How? We can't just spontaneously cause fat gain without consuming it through our mouth. So there's layers to this discussion. If we pinpoint in on cortisol, that's the most common one that I see. Yes, cortisol may cause the reallocation of fat from the extremities, so from your limbs to the central area, to your abdomen. Redistribution. You're not gaining extra fat, it's just redistributing it to your organs to keep your organs safe. But if we talk about cortisol causing fat gain, causing you to accumulate more fat, how does it do that? Spontaneously. It can contribute to fat gain by interrupting hunger and fullness signals, and usually when people are stressed, some people eat nothing, but others emotionally eat when they're stressed. And that extra calorie consumption increases calories in, and if calories out stays the same, you gain fat. Again, we look at another hormone. High insulin causes fat gain. How? It cannot spontaneously just snap your fingers and gain body fat. It has to come from somewhere. So high insulin, when you consume a calorie surplus, will lead to fat gain. Low insulin, when you consume a calorie surplus, will lead to fat gain. So this whole conversation is not about a specific hormone or a specific thing causing fat gain. They influence our behavior and our food choices and our activity levels, which then leads to weight gain or weight loss. So none of these things where people go, oh, hormones cause this. No, hormones influenced your behavior, whether that be the behavior around your food consumption or the behavior around your energy output. Your hormones and all of these things that people talk about, the complexities, they influence things. Okay? So when your hormones are going up and down, they're not just spontaneously causing fat gain. They are influencing your behavior and changing the amount of activity you're doing or changing the amount of food you're consuming, okay? The other part of this discussion is scale weight is not the same as fat gain. So I am completely understanding. You know what? I think I'm going to go through that in the next section. I'm going to hold that thought. But at the end of the day, when we talk about calories in, we've got the food volume versus food calories discussion, which we just went through. Then we have the whole hormone discussion. Again, we can't just spontaneously gain weight, okay? I want you to think about this. A little thought experiment. If you have a pet, just think about it. If you had your pet in front of you and you fed it the same amount of food and it did the same amount of exercise, if you somehow found a way to just stress it out, would you expect it to get really, really overweight? without extra food consumption and without changing its activity levels. How could it gain weight? I think there's this really interesting phenomenon where people have a pet and it gets overweight and they go, I'm going to change the amount of calories it's eating and I'm going to take it for a walk. That's where I agree with the simple side of this discussion. But obviously, being humans, we are not dogs. There's a lot more complexity to it. But just a thought experiment. We can't just spontaneously click our fingers and gain body fat. If you think of it as water in, 2 glasses, okay? This glass over here is your body fat, and this glass over here is just your external food environment, the food in your environment. You cannot add water to this glass without taking it from here and pouring it in. You cannot remove water from this glass without pouring it here, internal and external. So internal being what's inside you, external being all the calories and energy in the food and drink around us. We cannot get body fat stored inside of ourselves without consuming it. We can't just spontaneously gain body fat, okay? And that gets me to this whole thing of starvation mode. Starvation mode does not exist in the way that you've been led to believe that it does. Because again, there's some truth to it, like I just spoke about, where if you underfeed yourself, your basal metabolic rate may drop a little bit, or your NEAT may drop a little bit. But I think this whole idea that you're eating too little to lose weight, it's very flawed. Because starvation itself exists. So if people can quite literally die of starvation, why does starvation mode not occur in that situation? That's a big conflict. Okay, so it's a very, very, brazen example, but that's very conflicting ideas. If starvation mode can exist and you can eat too little calories to lose weight, how do we have people experiencing starvation? Life-threatening. Conflicting, all right? So that's just some things that go through my brain. So obviously there's a lot more to this whole calories in part of the conversation, okay? The other things affecting calories in is your behaviors, your environment, your food environment, your access to food, your behavior patterns, your tendency to eat when you are emotional, depending on the emotions you're experiencing. So I hope you can now realize that there's a lot more to this whole conversation of calories in, calories out than just eat more or eat less, move more, or eat more, move less. There's a lot more to the conversation. And I hope I've explained it enough for you to understand it somewhat. Scale weight. So when it comes to, this adds to the confusion where people say, I ate in a calorie deficit, but the scale stayed the same. Or I ate the exact same thing yesterday as I did the day before, but now the scale's up. That's not fat gain. Because the scale is more than a measurement of body fat. The scale is a measure of your total body weight. And there are things that can affect body weight that don't affect body fat. So this is the same thing where people say, okay, this medication causes fat gain. It doesn't spontaneously cause fat gain. It causes your hunger to go up or your activity levels to go down, which in the long term cause fat accumulation. Medications may cause water retention, which will see the scale go up, but there's no things that you can take that spontaneously cause fat gain. Because if we look at that same conversation, starvation is something that exists. If we had a medication or some sort of thing that caused spontaneous fat gain out of thin air, that would exist as a solution to starvation, which is a real issue. So we need to try and understand that whether it's a medication, whether it's hormonal changes, whether it's cortisol, insulin, all these sorts of things, none of these things can spontaneously cause fat gain unless you're eating in a calorie surplus, eating more calories than you're burning on a daily basis. And as I've just explained, the amount of calories you burn on a daily basis is very variable. And the amount of calories you consume is also very variable. So the scale is not everything because we can see different levels of water retention in our body due to a lot of things. So the scale shows our total body weight. And our total body weight can be very variable. The amount of food in your digestive system, that can change a lot. The amount of water you're retaining can change a lot depending on your salt intake and your carbohydrate intake. It can also be influenced, especially in women, during the menstrual cycle. The scale can sort of dance around a little bit because you have differing levels of hormones that are influencing the water balance in your body. But that does not mean it's the same as fat gain or fat loss. Okay, then, like I just said, you've got the conversation of medications. Do they cause weight gain or do they cause fat gain? Weight gain might be a bit of water retention. Causing fat gain, to me, would mean a medication that doesn't just spontaneously cause fat gain, but rather influences either your calorie input or your calorie output. So the medication either causes you to eat more or causes you to move less, or a mixture of the two. I want to reiterate, unless it is a very, very rare case, there's some like rare medical conditions that I can guarantee none of you probably have. Unless you fit into that 0.00001% bucket, you cannot just spontaneously accumulate body fat. You can't just sit there and without consuming it through your mouth, accumulate body fat. Ask yourself the question, how would that work? How would you gain body fat without consuming it through food? And work through that. Try and reason with yourself. How would that work? So when people say this hormone or this thing causes body fat, how does it cause body fat? Ask how. Is it causing you to consume more calories or is it causing you to move less? Because that's what we're talking about at the end of the day. So when we see people overcomplicating this discussion and talking about hormones, insulin, this, that, they're talking about things that influence calories in and calories out. At the end of the day, it always comes back to that discussion. Okay? I'm not going to talk about that for too much longer. I've just spent 51 minutes and 48 seconds talking about calories in, calories out. I think that's enough. I don't really want to talk about any more than that because we're already at 52 minutes. So I do some other stuff, but more so on the myth side of things, which I think I'm gonna make you wait till next episode for that one. But what I hope that you've gotten out of this podcast is you've understood both sides of the conversation. The really simple side of it truly is a matter of calories in, calories out. If you want to lose weight, you have to consume less than you burn. If you want to gain weight, you have to consume more than you burn. It is that simple. But that doesn't mean there's a shit ton that goes into both sides of those equations. So from a calories out standpoint, we have our basal metabolic rate, we have our thermic effective feeding, we have our exercise activity thermogenesis, we have our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Whether we're underfeeding or overfeeding, those things can change. They are variable. So there's a lot that goes into both sides of the equation. And on the simple side, eat more, move less, or eat less, move more, doesn't really help anyone. Earn more, spend less to get rich. Great. What do I do? What's the method I use to do that? Then on the overcomplicating side of things, but hormones, but insulin, but cortisol. Yes, I get it, but let's pull it back to the center. What side of that equation does that influence? Knowing that we can't just spontaneously gain body fat out of thin air, how does that hormone or that thing cause the accumulation of body fat? How does it do it? Let's reason it out. Okay, is it by that hormone influencing hunger and causing you to eat more? Is it by that hormone causing you to move less and therefore burn less calories? Which side does it affect? And then we can start to look for, okay, how can we help that? How can we control that a little bit more? Okay? So trying to understand, I hope you understand both sides of the equation. And I hope you feel like you have more empowerment, that you aren't broken. If you've tried the whole calories in, calories out, it's not that you're broken. It's just that there's more to eating less and moving more. It's not that simple. There's a lot more things a part of the whole thing. If I look at increasing calorie output, so the amount of calories you burn on a daily basis, we can do a bunch of things. Okay, we have our basal metabolic rate, which is going to just burn calories at rest. We can shift our diet to high protein, high fiber, high volume foods that require a lot of effort to digest. So we can burn maybe an extra 10 to 20% of our total calorie intake, we can burn that just digesting the food that we eat compared to eating chocolate, chips, ice cream, that sort of stuff. Then we have our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So we can structure our day, structure our lifestyle to promote more calorie output, more calorie burn. We can get a standing desk. We can get a walking pad under our desk at work. We can park the car further away at work, or we can actively choose to do more stuff around the house. We can actively make our lifestyle just that little bit more active. We can park further from work. We can do all of these things. We can take the stairs instead of the elevator. All these little things accumulate as calorie output, calorie burn. We can change the amount of exercise we can do. We can go to the gym more. We can walk more. We can start running. We can start cycling. We can start doing Pilates. There's all these things that we can do to increase the amount of calories we burn on a daily basis. Okay, again, we could look at your hormones. If your cortisol genuinely is high and you think that that's causing you to move less, okay, what can we do to help that? Do we need to reduce your caffeine intake? Do we need to improve your sleep? Do we need to get you out of a calorie deficit? What are all these things we can do to help that hormone that, reminder, isn't spontaneously causing you to gain weight? It's just influencing the amount of calories you consume or the amount of calories you burn. So I hope you feel empowered. There's a lot of things you can do. A lot of things you can do to burn more calories. When it comes to eating less calories, again, there's a lot of things that we can do to eat less calories. It doesn't mean eating less food, eating less calories. So if we try and move our diet towards high protein, high fiber whole foods as a good base for our diet, a lot of protein and plants, we can increase how much space food takes up in our stomach, which helps prevent us from overconsumption. Okay, making sure that we're consuming a lot of food that has a lot of volume and relatively low in calories. Not all the food we eat, but a lot of the food that we eat, to help us manage our hunger and appetite so we can eat less and pull down that calories in side of the equation, whilst we focus on what we can do to increase the calories out side of things. Or the reverse if you're trying to gain weight. Okay, so trying to make sure that we don't hone in on any one side of that argument. I personally, whenever I'm talking about any topic, I try and take from both extremes, because like I said at the beginning of the episode, I think usually the answer lies somewhere in the middle. Very rarely do answers lie at the extremes. They usually lie in the middle. Calories in, calories out is everything. Calories in, calories out doesn't work. I'm sitting in the middle. I'm saying there's a lot more to the conversation than just telling people calories in, calories out. But there's also a lot less to the conversation than saying that it doesn't work because of hormones. The concept is right. It's the interpretation and the communication of the concept that needs work. And I hope I've done a good job of explaining that today. Okay, so I think I'm going to end that episode there. I hope you learned something. It's a very simplistic topic from a surface view, calories in, calories out. But as you saw, there's a lot more to the conversation than just eating less, moving more. All right, so I'm going to leave that there and leave you with the thought that you are in control. And even if you find yourself there thinking that you have bad genetics or that your metabolism is slow, I hope that what you take from this is that you can change. You are not broken. Because there's two interpretations of all this that I've said. You can take the side that you don't want to listen to me and that I'm lying and that I'm wrong and you're right, and that's fine. You can keep looking for hacks or quick fixes or solutions to the problems. Or you can accept what I'm saying, that what I'm saying has a big element of truth to it and that you are in control. And that you can modify the calories in and calories out side of the equation to help you achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. Okay, this is not me talking out of my ass and just plucking things out of thin air, just like you can't pluck body fat out of thin air or can't burn body fat out of thin air. Okay, this is all stuff that's grounded in science. It is not ideas, it is fact. That we can't just gain fat or lose fat without creating an energy surplus or an energy deficit. And that's what I hope that you now understand. Any questions, comments, feedback, good or bad, let me have it. Any criticisms, any disagreements, I'm all for it. And that's a big thing. Like one thing that I do or have tried to get better at is disagreeing with people. And if people disagree with me, I'm happy to have a very calm conversation with them to try and reason with them. Because there's two sides of the industry. There's the simple, there's the complex. I fall in the middle, so a lot of people disagree. But yeah, I am not going to have a longer conversation than it needs to be. I think I've touched on everything. Please stop listening to the extremes of the argument. When you see an argument online, try and think, where's the middle ground? Where can I take the facts from both sides of the argument and sit in the middle? If you're confused, ask me, I'll point you in the right direction. That's if you think I'm a reliable source of information. If you don't, no stress. I hope you feel more in control of your body weight, of your fitness goals. If there's any questions, drop them in the comments below. Send me a message over on Instagram. Do what you want to do. Appreciate the support. Thank you very much for listening to episode number 2 of the Coastal Performance Nutrition Podcast, and I'll speak to you soon. See you later.